Mark and Luke and any other place in between. This is a picture which you will see. This is a picture of my grandfather, Morris Allen Sr. Now, but I'm going to get to Morris Allen Sr. in a minute. But I would look at that house and say, one day I'm going to have a house just like that. Why it was so ridiculous? During the era that I grew up, when I was a child, people would work in the cotton fields when the cotton was real short, and they would chop the cotton, which means that they would clean out the grass in between it and all of it, and they were paid $3 a day. Not an hour, $3 a day. How long was the day? Well, there was a term, I think they did say from kin to cane, but it's actually uh, really the correct interpretation is from can to king, from the time that they could work. And that was determined by the sun. If you got out there and you were in the fields before the sun came up, and you did not go home until the sun went down, that determined how long your day was for the $3. If you were in the season where the cotton came up to be picked, you were paid $2 per 100 pounds. And if you picked 200 pounds, you made $4. And so, you know, there were a number of interesting things that I discovered as I was a child. I discovered, number one, you know, I'm not going to make it as a cotton picker and a cotton chopper. It's just not going to work for me. I'm not good at that. And I was never at the head of my class, and thank God that he gave me some other talents. But that was a measure of how successful you were with how many pounds of cotton could you pick. Can you imagine that? Anyway, so trying to imagine owning that house, making $3 a day. If I would have said that out loud, people would say, where's the loony bin? Let's take this kid to the loony bin. He's crazy. That's how ridiculous it was. But as Jesse would say, I kept hope alive. I kept the dream alive, but I kept it within myself. So I grew up, went to high school there, graduated, had an opportunity to get a little small scholarship to A&M College in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. Turned it down because my sister had said to me, all my sisters and brothers, by the way, were much older than I, and I was a surprise tummy from my mother when she was about 44. That was me. But anyway, she lived, and all my brothers and sisters lived in Detroit. So I left, and after high school, went to Detroit to go to Wayne State University. And in the day that I went there, which I don't hear any of you majoring in education, but I hear you doing things and wanting to do things with charter schools, and that's another whole story. I won't have time to tell that story, but I was at one time considered one of the pioneers in charter schools. I had more charter schools in the beginning, about 16 years ago, than I think any person in the United States at that time, black or white. But there was a reason why that took place. It wasn't by accident. But went to Detroit. Was going to be a math major. It soon kicked in that that separate but equal schooling did not work. I did not have the proper preparation in high school. I had not had advanced. I'd heard of calculus, but I never heard anything, you know, advanced other courses. We didn't even offer that stuff, you know. I want to paint the setting for you. Every book, it was like, wow, we got a book that nobody's name is in it. Any of you know what I'm talking about? Well, let me explain it to you. The way the separate but equal system worked was that the white school in the community got all the books first. And after they used them, they passed them on to the black school, which we were part of. And if we happened to, by accident, they ordered too many books and they didn't need them, and you got a book that had nobody's name written inside, that was like a miracle. So this is kind of like the setting that we went to. But one thing that we did have, and it's very important, it has remained very important, and it's a thing about human nature. We had a sense of who we were, not who they told us we were. We had a sense of pride. I had a teacher in elementary school. I remember we used to have assemblies, and we called our teachers back in that day and time professors, and they truly were professors. But I remember we were lined up in the auditorium of one of the Rosenwald schools. Kindergartners in the front, and each grade level went all the way back to the 8th grade. And Professor Reed would walk around that classroom pasting something like I'm pasting, and students like you were paying attention. And he would simply decide to point at someone, and he would say the phrase, "I am somebody." Now what that meant was, you had better be prepared to name a person of color. You were either Marian Anderson, the first person sing in Carnegie Hall. You were Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois. You were Booker T. Washington. You were Dr. Drew, and all of these. That created a sense of self-confidence, even though the community, the worldwide, was pressing us down as a people. Inside our community, inside our schools, we were built up to believe that we were as good as anybody. That served me very well, and serves me very well today. Because when I went to Detroit, even though I had a separate and unequal education, I didn't have any better sense to think that I was as good as anybody.